Hello, everybody, and welcome to Ellensburg, Washington, USA, home of Central Washington University. Welcome to this live stream. The local time is 11:46 a.m. on a Friday morning. Thank you to the more than 200 viewers, more than 250 viewers who have remembered to join us on this very unusual day and time. And today's date is January 12th, 2024. 2 degrees Fahrenheit. At least we're above zero. It is wintry here in Ellensburg, and I'm sure that it is wintry in most of the locations. I see 5x5, and I'm pleased to see that. I have a whole new setup. I maybe will tell you the story. Nat Nickel was in here for 2 hours yesterday afternoon. Might as well go to it right now. So normally we are Thursdays at noon, Sundays at 9 a.m. Pacific. And I tried twice with many of you yesterday, which was the normal day and time, and we had a crackling microphone. So I think we've solved it. I'm hopeful that we solved it. And today, here we are, Friday, January 12th at noon, which is a unique time and day for us. And yes, the next episode will be back to our normal schedule on Sunday. Let me check my scenes just to make sure we're good there. And if we're still 5x5, then I'm just going to be very happy inside and not think about it. There's shelf cam and the snow. It's a light dusting. It's nice, powdery, beautiful snow that continues to fall. But we have a wind chill. I'm sure the wind chill is below zero. There's the desktop, and there is the home base. Okay, good. Where are you viewing from today? I sound great. 5x5. So pleased to see that. Backcountry Gary. Hello, Gary. Double A day. No, what am I doing? I'm looking at locations. Good Lord, man. Let's go. Coscob, Connecticut. Thief River Falls, Minnesota. Where are you viewing from? Tri-Cities, Washington. Bastrop, Texas, y'all. Snowy Thorpe, Washington. No, Thorpe, Wisconsin. Port Wing, Wisconsin. Spokane, Washington, that's Kenneth. We're talking about your home turf today, Kenneth. Hood River, Oregon. Springfield, Illinois. Anaconda, Montana. Erfurt, Germany. Muncie, Indiana. Ephrata, Washington. Kingsgate, Washington. Selwood, Oregon. Gifford, Washington. Vienna, Austria. Hello, Amadeus. Mike and Leslie in Boxborough, or Borough, Massachusetts. Boston, basically. Petersburg, Alaska, Omak, Washington, Sacramento, California, Burpengary, Australia. Hello, Graham. Mechosen, British Columbia. London calling, says Red Lester. I have to do it. Are we 5x5? How's the video? Are we crackling? If there's another 5x5 report and comments like this is extremely strong with video and audio, then I will just stop thinking about it. I promise. Are we 5x5? There's a delay in the comments. There's Google Glen in Liberty Lake, +1. There we go. Quite a bit of delay. No crackle. I'm not a fan of the word crackle at this point, so I don't want to see the word crackle, even if you're saying no crackle. I just want to see 5x5. Gorgeous video. Thank you, Elaine. Okay, yeah, considerable delay, I must say. I don't know if that's because of this new setup that I have. Have I already said it? If you're watching this in replay, there'll be a chapter title more than 10 minutes from now, into the future, where the program will begin. But we are just double checking here that we're good. So I have a few minutes to tell you the story. Yeah, I guess so. Now that I'm feeling like we're good. Do I say it out loud and jinx it? Why not? Nat Nickel was in here for 2 hours yesterday afternoon. We double-checked everything. We troubleshot everything, if that's a phrase. Is it the microphone? Is it the software? Is it the Chrome browser? Is it this? Is it the cord? Is it this? Is it that? All sorts of 2 hours of that. And eventually Nat, who is very, very good, and I've already given him a number of gift cards to the Tav in beautiful downtown Ellensburg and Vinman's Bakery in beautiful downtown Ellensburg. You've got to love it. So if things sound particularly good today, and possibly even if the video is better, it's not that I have a new computer, it's not that I have a new microphone, it's not that I have a new anything. I simply am using StreamKey as opposed to webcam. So that's little inside baseball stuff with how to broadcast to YouTube. But apparently there were struggles with YouTube dealing with OBS and dealing with the webcam business. So I'm just using a StreamKey, which apparently is what video gamers use, like Nat, stuff that I know nothing about. But this was actually an easier setup than I normally do. And I am thrilled if this is an improvement over what we were doing. And I never really have that microphone problem again. Will there be other problems in the future? Of course, that's part of this. And shouldn't I hire a whole team of AB people? No, I got Nat, and otherwise I want to just continue to learn how to do this on my own. Okay, I continue to see 5x5, so I will stop officially thinking about that. Let's do a couple programming notes. I've already showed you that today is Friday at noon. We're going to start the program in 9 minutes, and part 2 of today will be Sunday. We'll be back on schedule, Sunday morning at 9 o'clock. Should I show it to you again? Why not? So here we are today, January 12th. I'll see you again January 14th, Sunday morning, 9 a.m. And we will have a guest here and here. I kind of forget if we do here, so I have to figure that out using this new setup, but that's for another time. We do not have a Friday noon lecture today, and that was on the schedule. It's a 3-day weekend here. There's a Martin Luther King holiday on Monday. It's a federal holiday. But if you are a fan of these Friday at noon lectures, we've already had one this winter term. Maybe you saw a replay, or maybe you were with us live. That was Logan. And assuming that Kelly Wall can get here from Portland this coming Friday, I think there's more snow in the forecast. Kelly from the USGS and the Cascade Volcano Observatory will be giving a noon talk on the Goat Rocks volcano, and an exciting new collaboration that she has with our newest geology professor, Hannah Shamlu, who is absolutely outstanding. And the rest of the Friday noon talks. So these are Friday noon talks that are coming as well. By March 1st, we'll be done with our Ice Age floods A to Z, but with these other talks, I'll be kind of toggling back and forth between what we're doing here with the Ice Age and what we're doing down the hall in the auditorium. Okay, well, we have Dean, who is, and both Dean and Richard from Spokane. Thank you, fellas, for being here. Dean and Richard, their work will be featured today, and a number of other people as well who may or may not be joining us live. But it is a viewer participation show more so than ever. Say hi to a few more, and then I need to start getting my head right, since I'm officially not thinking about technology anymore. Look at me, everybody. I don't even have to test my stations anymore. I'm feeling very good at the moment. I don't have a very good poker face. I was pissed yesterday. So that if you were with us the second time around and I was trying to do it even with a crackly microphone, I just wasn't into it. You could probably tell. And I've removed all of those testing videos and other aborted tries from yesterday. There's like 7 different videos, both testing and all that stuff's removed from the channel. Vince is from Punxsy Lake, British Columbia. Bob's from Riverton, Illinois. Jim is in Houston, Atlanta, Georgia, Marion, Virginia, Forest Grove, Oregon, LaPorte, Minnesota. I'll read right here. Why not? Let me get these. Lyle, Washington, Yosemite, California. Hello, Sean. Vancouver, Washington, Kamloops, BC. Everybody talking nice things to backcountry Gary Paul, who continues to excel in all things in life. Pat from Yakima, it's chilly down there. Yep, that's true. Rick in Costa Rica. Saraland, Alabama. Hello. Long Beach, California. Michael is from Trim, Ireland. Michael, you are a regular. Thank you. Pat in Natchez. Best video and audio ever. So thrilled by that. Kirk and Philomath. Mugs by Kirk. Thank you, Kirk. Oak Harbor, Washington, Owensboro, Kentucky, Crystal, Minnesota. So it looks like we're functional on your end as far as number of viewers. It's a weird day. I can't expect that we'll have more than 1,000 today because not everybody's going to get the word what's going on. But we have almost 600 right now, and the number continues to grow. So we have enough to make it an event. And I'm really looking forward to getting this one out. I've been sitting on this for 4 or 5 days. And I've even added some stuff since yesterday. Got some emails that were condolence emails. I'm sorry you had all the trouble yesterday. And some emails from folks who know some things about Thomas Large, and so I've added a few things just from yesterday. Also, if you were with us yesterday, I'm just stalling before we start. If you were with us yesterday, I had an extra long wind-up. I wasn't happy with it. So it's going to be more to the point today. That's the goal. We don't need a 25-minute wind-up. You've been watching these in order. We don't need that. Get to it, boy. Get to it. Soup Lake, Washington. I think you mean Soap Lake, Washington. Damn that autocorrect, Mark. Redmond, Washington. Newland, North Carolina. Dave is in Dewato, Washington. Okay, the Dewato Till. Home of the Dewato Till, David. From, was that Brett's or Willis? Brett's, I guess. Yeah, thanks. I guess there's a little bit of stuff that Brett's thought was Till over by Port Orchard. Is that where all those auto dealers are? Silverdale, Silverwood, Silver something? Gordon's in Glasgow, Scotland, everybody. Adventuresome Brada got up early. Okay, great. Okay, I got a couple minutes. I'm going to go take a walk in the chilly conditions, but I need to get my head right. Thank you so much for tuning in live. More than 650 now. Thank you so much for being here live, and I hope that you enjoyed today's program on Thomas Large. 2-minute warning. Shelf cam. Go. Hot mic. Hot mic. My idea of live streaming right now. I'm sorry for that loud voice.
I got it. No worries. Hi, Peter. How are you? Good. How are you? Good. Back from your trip.
pleasant good afternoon to you all. Thank you for joining us. I hope that you enjoy this episode. Episode O, called Thomas Large in Spokane. I've got a number of things planned today. We're halfway through the alphabet in this Ice Age Floods A to Z series. This is Central Washington University. My name's Nick Zentner, and we spent half the alphabet pre-J. Harlan Bretz in 1922 and pre-Ice Age. But we are finally here. Episode O, we are in Eastern Washington thinking about the Ice Age floods and the Ice Age in general. And I promise we will not leave again. We will be in Eastern Washington more or less for the rest of the alphabet thinking about the Ice Age. I'm happy with what we've done so far. I thought it was important to expect or to investigate these influences on J. Harlan Bretz before his arrival in Spokane on August 1st of 1922, but we are here. The summer of 1922 is our time frame today, and Thomas Large is the main figure. Let me give you a thumbnail sketch verbally of Thomas Large just to entice you to stick around. Thomas Large was a science teacher at Lewis and Clark High School in downtown Spokane. He was 50 years old when he started that job and moved to Spokane in the early 1920s. He's past midlife, and he has all of this energy after taking this new science teaching job at Lewis and Clark High School. And within a year, apparently, it's this high school teacher. He was a biology teacher. He wasn't even teaching geology. Thomas Large was writing letters to the United States Geological Survey and the University of Chicago in 1921, apparently, and asking if professional geologists could come to Eastern Washington and give a professional opinion on the geology of the area so that he could improve his teaching in this new town where he was living. And who did he get to come to Spokane? In 1921, 1922, 1923, he got Joseph Pardee and he got J. Harlan Bretz, two of the biggest names in the Missoula flood story as it's been told for many, many years now. So Thomas Large, up until today, has been kind of a footnote in the story of the Missoula floods, and I'm hoping to amplify his life and his work and his influence on developing the Missoula flood story as we know it. I'm not the first to be aware of Thomas Large, but because of viewers of this program, we have an incredible amount of new material that has been unearthed in the last few weeks. And I'm going to tell you that story as well. And we're going to use a bunch of these old letters, old class notes of Thomas Large, papers that Large wrote, but we have to bring Pardee into it as well. So I hope that Thomas Large is willing to share the stage with Joseph Pardee today. Since yesterday's aborted live stream, I've decided to leave the Bretz part of this really till next time, which is Sunday morning at 9 a.m. I think there's so much with both Pardee and Large that we'll be focusing on evidence for the Spokane ice sheet over the city of Spokane and those deposits that are telling that story. And we'll touch on the water part of this story a little bit today, but I think once we get to Sunday morning with Bretz, we will hand it off to Bretz and talk about the early ideas of Ice Age flooding in the Spokane area. Okay, so I want to show you one document which got me interested in this high school science teacher in Spokane angle of the story. And this is something that I inherited in a filed cabinet when I came to Central in 1992, and Edward Clucking was a geology professor here in the 1960s and the 70s and the 80s, and Bud gave me this and many other documents. So this is another science high school teacher in Ellensburg, in Spokane, Joseph McMacken, and McMacken wrote this paper, Vicissitudes, how about that? Vicissitudes of Spokane River in Late Geological Times, and our date is too young, or this is way after our topic today. This is not 1922, this is 1937. But this is McMacken about ready to retire, perhaps, from the high school. And I've bookmarked the page where McMacken says, These dams at Hellgate and at Grand Coulee were now to change the entire drainage of the Spokane River from the Big Bend of the Columbia southward into the Scablands. This event forms the basis of the flood theory, first mentioned in print by Bretz. However, one of the first suggestions of the flood theory was made by Alonzo P. Troth of the Lewis and Clark High School in Spokane. And if Bretz is the father of the Scablands, surely Troth is the grandfather. So I read that 20 years ago maybe, and my ears perked up. A high school teacher had this idea before Bretz did? I'm from a family of high school science teachers. My wife is a high school science teacher. 2 of our boys are high school science teachers. I know that world. And it's a combination typically of not very glamorous life of working with, late teens and trying to develop them as people and develop them as students. But you also have enough depth in your teaching where you are oftentimes using the topic or the field of your expertise in the area, whether it's geology, biology, any kind of natural science. And so when I read what Thomas Large is doing, I think of my dad, Carl Zentner, who was a high school biology teacher in Fort Atkinson, Wisconsin for many decades. And we'll look at some of these class notes in a bit of Thomas Large, and I just think of my dad. So there's a personal angle here that I'm amplifying this high school science teacher scene because I value those folks. And perhaps they have not gotten the credit that they deserve. That's maybe too strong, but that's what I'm willing to say, I guess, right now. Okay, so how can we get into this? I think we do a very quick backstory. Bretz is in the Pacific Northwest each of these summers, almost all these summers. He's also in Wisconsin. We've done this already. And if I can get these field notes from 1921, I'm going to be curious if Bretz and one of his students, Richard Foster Flint from the University of Chicago, was actually approaching the city of Spokane in 1921. I don't have those field notes yet. I'm hoping to get them before the end of the month. But here we are in 1922 today, from August 1st to August 30th. Bretz and I think a handful of grad students doing some mapping and dealing with Thomas Large personally. Remember, please, that Bretz did some work in Puget Sound in these years. He was down in the Columbia River Gorge with the University of Chicago students in these years. And now, again, the mystery notes of 1921 hopefully will be materializing before our very eyes in the next couple of weeks. But we're firmly in Spokane as a home base, not Portland as a home base, but Spokane as a home base, thanks to Thomas Large inviting Bretz and others. What are we working on? We're working on the idea that once upon a time in the 1920s, pretty much everybody was talking about evidence for the Spokane ice sheet. 150,000 years ago, stage 6 ice. Stage 6 ice. This is Western Washington's till, but according to everybody 100 years ago, there's till on the highlands above downtown Seattle that dates to this stage 6. They didn't have stage 6 data, of course. They didn't have this number, of course, but they were making maps, including Bretz, showing this Spokane ice over the city of Spokane. That's important because if we have a majority of Ice Age floodwater that is stage 6, that means the water is coming directly from this mythical Spokane ice sheet. You know, one of my main questions this winter is what the hell happened to the Spokane ice sheet? And I'm really just saying, what the hell happened to the map showing this old ice advance? It's been ignored in the last 50 years, maybe for good reason, maybe not for good reason. This is the much younger late Wisconsin or late glacial story, the most recent glacial advance 20,000 years ago in both places. And all of our glacial Lake Missoula data is from this red time, this 20,000 stage 2 time. We're exploring this older stage at the time. Here's the hero of today, Thomas Large. You've been staring at his photo as a thumbnail before this live stream began. We continue now to work with Thomas Large. So today I want to do Joseph Pardee right now, then Large, and we'll save most of the Harley Brett stuff from 1922, probably until tomorrow, unless for some reason I'm ahead of schedule, which is very doubtful. Feeling okay? Hopefully you're interested and ready to go with this. Thomas Large, I'll do it here. Thomas Large was reading the old papers. Thomas Large was reading Simons. Thomas Large was reading Sir J.W. Dawson talking about the Canadian ice sheet. All these names are familiar to us. I.C. Russell. So it's like we've done our homework, and that's what Large was doing, apparently, when he first set foot in Spokane. Where is Spokane in pertaining to what we were doing with Brett's? You remember, here's Brett's submergence. Spokane is way the hell up here. And in between Spokane and the Columbia submergence, as Brett's was calling it, this is the Scablands. So I'm fascinated, and I won't know until we get the 1921 notes. Did Brett's just suddenly, did Brett's do this big hop, this big jump over to Spokane? Or was the 1921 summer field work kind of getting into some of this country to finally get him to Spokane in 1922? Okay, let's go to Joseph Pardee. He goes to the desktop. He goes to the slideshow, Nick Zentner does. It's not Third Person Thursday, it's Third Person Friday. That doesn't even make sense, doesn't matter. Let's go. Thomas, we're coming to you. Please be patient. J. Harlan Bretts, we're coming to you late today and into tomorrow. Do it. Oh, come on, man. Here's Bretts' 1919 Columbia submergence. This is from Sky Cooley's blog, and Sky has put in the modern digital elevation model for Lake Lewis, just like Google Earth Glen was showing us how accurate Bretts' mapping was compared to today. Here's another way to show that. Incredible. Remember, Bretts thought this was salt water coming from the Pacific Ocean in 1919. By 1922, it's clear to him this is fresh water coming from Spokane as opposed to salt water coming from the ocean. Okay, Joseph Pardee. We could do a whole episode on this guy. We're not going to do it. We're just going to do enough to get familiar with him. Here's Pardee back in his earlier days. Quick and dirty. Joseph Pardee, born in Salt Lake City, Utah, in a mining family, 1871. At the age of 3, he moves to Montana, a little town called Phillipsburg, and I believe he passed away in Phillipsburg. So his hometown was a home base, as I understand it, for most of his life. He loved Montana and loved Montana geology. Joseph's dad ran the Algonquin mine. A young Joseph Pardee went to Presbyterian College in Deer Lodge, Montana, and then he did some advanced schooling, maybe a master's degree in geology, I'm not sure, at UC Berkeley. He starts his career. Who are we talking about? We're talking about Pardee. Joseph Pardee right now. We're not to Thomas Large yet. Remember, Thomas Large is one of the two people that Large is going to invite to Spokane to check out his local area, Spokane. So I know this is quick and dirty. There's way more that can be talked about with this, but let's go ahead anyway. Pardee starts his career with the USGS in 1909. Within a year, he publishes a Glacial Lake Missoula paper. Let's continue the story here. He is mostly doing Pacific Northwest geology work during Pardee's career as a USGS employee, ice age deposits, gold deposits, mine sites, dam sites. He retires from the USGS. Pardee we're talking about in 1941, and then famously, right after his retirement, he publishes another Glacial Lake Missoula paper, this time entitled Unusual Currents. So there's this beautiful bookend in Pardee's career. Early Glacial Lake Missoula paper, late Glacial Lake Missoula paper. Passes away in 1960 in that little town in Montana. Okay. So was Pardee the first guy to talk about Glacial Lake Missoula? No, we've already said that in this series. Remember, it was Chamberlain back in 1885 when he was traveling out west by himself. He'd said goodbye to Salisbury at Yellowstone and continued west. And T.C. Chamberlain in 1885 was in Montana, was in Lake Pend Oreille, was in the Spokane area, just doing real recon and hardly typing up anything. But Chamberlain was the first to notice these strange marks on the hillside. But we're going to go ahead and look then at the work that Pardee did in that early Glacial Lake Missoula paper. So this is a modern photograph by Tom Foster, but if you are unfamiliar with the University of Montana and these faint lines on the hillside, this is what Chamberlain noticed in 1885, and this is what Pardee wrote his paper on in 1910. The concept that Pardee had was that we had a glacial Lake Missoula, freshwater now. This is not saltwater, this is freshwater, meltwater from a glacier nearby that's ponding in this Clark Fork Valley and getting up to the highest of these faint watermarks. And here's a modern map from Kevin Pogue down at Whitman College. And Kevin gives us a nice, very simple map of the extent of Glacial Lake Missoula. Spokane, the topic today, is right in here. Okay, that cues me to read to you verbally from the Glacial Lake Missoula paper that Pardee wrote. There's a reason I'm doing this before we get to Thomas Large. You're just going to have to trust me. Do I want to look into your eyes when I read? Nope, we're going to use Docky. So you have this, you have most of these papers I'm talking about today at nickzentner.com. You have this paper, Pardee 1910, Glacial Lake Missoula. Now, where's Brett's in 1910? He hasn't even stopped teaching high school in Seattle. Brett's is about to go back to Chicago to do his PhD in geology. So this is way before Brett's even becomes a geology student in Chicago. Man, okay. So here's Pardee in 1910. As long ago as 1885, Professor Chamberlain noticed a curious phenomenon in the Flathead Lake region that he aptly describes as a series of parallel watermarks of the nature of exceptionally slight terraces sweeping around the sides of the valley and encircling the isolated hills within, like gigantic musical staves. We've already mentioned that. In the vicinity of Missoula, similar phenomenon have been observed by Professor Salisbury. I just want to point out that Pardee is in verbal communication or by letter with Salisbury, who's back at the University of Chicago. Keep it going. The photograph of Mount Jumbo, well-known landmark at the mouth of Hellgate Canyon. We're in western Montana, everybody. This is Joseph Pardee, 1910. Brings out more plainly than any written statement could the striking horizontality of these parallel lines. The partly melted snow rather emphasizes them. Still, when the ground is entirely bare, they can be plainly seen from the city and have been interpreted by some of the pioneer inhabitants as old buffalo trails. At close range, it is difficult to locate definitely any but the more prominent trails, the highest of which is an elevation above Missoula 1,000 feet, or that's 4,200 feet above sea level. This and the subsequent elevations as given were determined by aneroid. We know what an aneroid is now. I'm just grabbing certain sections. I'm going to do this with Pardee in 1910 and Pardee in 1918, and the whole reason, I'll tell you why I'm doing this verbally. The reason I'm doing this is that Pardee has spent a lot of time looking at glacial deposits before he shows up in Spokane in 1922. That's why I'm showing this to you. Most of this you can read, but I'm not going to highlight. Still talking about the watermarks of Glacial Lake Missoula. Before the 4,200-foot contour, the slopes exhibit a succession of parallel trails, except that many of them are conspicuously marked by rows of trees and shrubs. One, at 3,700 feet elevation, is more than ordinarily prominent. It might at one place be easily mistaken for an abandoned wagon road, along which rows of trees had been set. That's new to me. that these different levels of Glacial Lake Missoula, those strand lines are not all the same. And there's one in particular that's noticeably stronger etched into the hillside than the others. Will that be significant to us later on? The foregoing phenomenon as a whole seems explainable only as the records of an extinct lake or sea. So he was entertaining seawater at that time, I guess. The old Buffalo Trails are existing remnants of its wave terraces. Its high level was approximately 4,200 feet above sea level. At this stage, the size of the present city of Missoula was under 1,000 feet of water, and glaciers from the Bitterroot Range south of Hamilton reached the lake, setting boulder-laden icebergs afloat upon it. The gravel flats, observed by another geologist, Calkins, in some tributary valleys of the Clark Fork are explainable as delta deposits in a lake. The lake receded gradually, recording many brief halts and a comparatively long one at that big 3,700-foot mark. I just want to do a little bit more. This is running a little bit long, but there's a reason. This is going to be a slow play. I'm setting this now, but we'll keep coming back to this paper, I think, because there's comment on it, and there's a weird lack of comment on it by some of the players in the next few shows. The evidence of icebergs, together with the apparent recency of the lake and the variable height of its surface, connect this lake with the glacial period and readily lend themselves to the suggestion that its dam was of ice. Bailey Willis had suggested this was a Pleistocene lake dammed by a glacier. Many years ago, Professor Chamberlain conceived of the idea of a glacial dam and furthermore tentatively suggested that its location was in the Pend Oreille region with an outflow by way of Spokane. That's personal communication with Chamberlain. So here's Joseph Pardee, more than a decade before he's invited to the Spokane area by Thomas Large. And Pardee, who just starts at the USGS, is writing letters to Chamberlain, is writing letters to Salisbury, is writing letters to Willis, I guess. I don't know. Do we need to go chase down a bunch of the Pardee letters? Do they exist somewhere? I'm floored by how much of this is fleshed out before Brett's even starts studying geology. That's true. It's 2 years before he even goes to Chicago to start working with Chamberlain and Salisbury. So why isn't this Glacial Lake Missoula thing intimately woven into every conversation that Brett's has? Brett's is doing stuff in Puget Sound, but why isn't Glacial Lake Missoula brought up even then as some sort of comparative thing? Because Willis, Chamberlain, and Salisbury all know about Pardee's work with Glacial Lake Missoula. I find that fascinating. British Columbia was formerly buried under a vast accumulation of ice, generally referred to as the Cordilleran Ice Sheet, has been made known by the writings of Dawson and others. It appears that the south-flowing portion of this ice cap were even at the 49th parallel of the great depths. I'm going fast, I know. Its margin was markedly lobate. South-flowing tongues have been occupying every large valley that crosses the border between the Cascade Mountains and the Continental Divide. That's also going to come up to us. We've got a continental ice sheet in Canada, but that ice sheet in Canada is coming down in fingers. Jerome Lessman commented on this before Christmas. We've got basically alpine glaciers crossing the border and coming down each of these north-south trending valleys or trenches, including ice coming right for Spokane, ice coming right for Missoula, ice coming right for Chelan. I mean, there's this corrugated relief, a north-south trending relief. These Canadian trenches are these gutters, these barrels aimed right south to the channeled scablands. This is still 1910. While the limits of these great valley glaciers cross the boundary west of the Idaho Panhandle are fairly well known, knowledge of those east of that point is more or less fragmentary. The Great Depth flowed south, Rocky Mountain Trench, we got it. Deep Glacier floats, got it. Okay, I've made my point. Now, we're done with the 1910 paper. You can read all of that paper in all of its glory. I think it's a beautiful paper, and it's written by this young, eager guy, Joseph Pardee. We now go to the slides and jump 8 years later to 1918. Now we're just 3 or 4 years before Pardee comes to Spokane. But he's looking at more glacial deposits. This is by slide, not by Docky the document camera. So this is also waiting for you. It's a 1918 paper by Pardee, Joseph Pardee, doing geologic mapping of not only Ice Age geology, but mineral deposits in the Colville Indian Reservation. That's in northern Washington. Let's do it. I'm just going to pick and choose little spots. So Pardee spends 2 full field seasons, 1912 and 1913, in the Colville Indian Reservation, where, by the way, many of Randy Lewis' ancestors were living. Here's the extent of the Colville Indian Reservation. So here's Spokane, where we're about to head. Here's Wenatchee. Here's the town of Chelan and Lake Chelan. This is the famous channeled scablands where we will be for the next few episodes. But this hatched area is still the reservation. And you need permits to get on there. We filmed with Atwater and Joel and Jerome back a couple months ago. We had to get all sorts of permits, and a representative of the tribe of the Colville Nation to be with us. But this is back when Pardee was just wandering around making maps. What is he seeing? What is Pardee seeing directly north of the famous channeled scablands that J. Harlan Bretz was working on? I'll just pick some spots. Pardee says, between the time of the last basaltic flow and the beginning of the Pleistocene epoch, the Columbia River excavated its gorge, more than 100 miles in length to the present depth of 1,600 feet or more. How's your memory? If we go back to the Sky Cooley episodes before Thanksgiving, we were emphasizing that there was a rugged landscape in eastern Washington before the Great Lavas 16 million years ago. And then there was a rugged landscape again between 16 million years ago and the Ice Age. So there's time to uplift and incise and develop these dendritic drainages. So Pardee is figuring that out, that since the time of the Great Lavas 16 million years ago, the Columbia digs a hole around the margin of the lavas more than 1,500 feet deep. What else is Pardee seeing up on the reservation? There's that, I love this phrase, after sufficient time had elapsed for the Columbia to sink its channel 1,600 feet or more below the northern edge of the lava plain, the present site of the Colville Reservation was largely overridden by the Cordilleran Pleistocene ice sheet. When the ice finally withdrew, the land was so low that the present 1,700-foot contour, and possibly for a brief time still higher ones, coincided with the level of the sea. Boy, does he really mean salt water here? I didn't even notice that. Continuing, the Okanagan Lobe, so this is the ice sheet coming down from Canada, was so vast and had so much momentum that the valley or gorge of the Columbia River, now he's got it at 2,000 feet deep, was unable to halt or even swerve it from its southward course. Within the reservation, the ice mass must have been several thousand feet thick, all the surfaces west of the Nispelum Range, except possibly the summit of Moses Mountain, under ice. The erosive action of this glacier is abundantly shown by worn surfaces, particularly on the prominences that lay in the path of the main current down the Okanagan Valley. How you doing? If we got the live viewers who were participating in unearthing all this Thomas Large stuff, they're like, would you please get to this? What are you doing, man? You're eating up valuable time. Get to the good stuff with Thomas Large. Or maybe you're saying that if you didn't do that as well. I'm almost there. In addition to loose mantle rock, considerable of the bedrock must have been removed by all exposed places, and it's evident that some of the valleys, such as the Omak Lake Trench, were deepened and enlarged by the ice. This is fascinating work by Joseph Pardee in 1918, before Bretz arrives in eastern Washington. A significant feature of the Okanagan Highlands is a generally northerly direction of the main divides and valleys. Photos from 1912, 1913. Within the area of Pleistocene glaciation, drift is irregularly but rather generally distributed. The most extensive accumulations are in the upper valleys of the Omak Creek and Nispelem River, the valley south of Omak Lake and Twin Lakes Basin. The depth of the drift is 100, maybe 200 feet down to a vanishing point, but probably less average than the mean. Elsewhere, the drift is in general patchy. Every once in a while, you see it. The drift topography is characteristically irregular, but typical moraines are uncommon. What am I doing? He's about to go to Spokane, and he's going to check out some deposits. And those deposits are going to look very similar to what he maps in the Colville Reservation. Because the bulk of the ice lay in the valleys, the bulk of the drift was deposited there and became thus most favorably situated for the concentration of floods upon it. Localities in which the glacial fluviatile forms are especially well developed in particular sections. Now, is Pardee thinking this is all just one batch of ice? That there's just one generation of ice? Let's continue. I say let's continue, boy. As indicated in the foregoing paragraphs, a large part of the Colville Reservation has been heavily glaciated. In fact, the greater part of the area, having been overridden by two main lobes of the Cordilleran ice sheet, lie within the region of the continental Pleistocene glaciation. The larger of the two lobes mentioned flowed down the Okanagan Valley. It not only filled the Columbia Valley from the Grand Coulee to Chelan Falls, but pushed far out on the Big Bend Plateau. Main two lobes. Now, does he mean two separate lobes at the same time, or does he mean one lobe and then a second lobe? By the way, more verbal stuff with Salisbury, I think, right? One. Oh, no, I didn't look at this paper. There's a Salisbury paper from 1901. I haven't looked at that one. In the Pleistocene epoch, ice sheets depended from the north, glaciated most of the region. Okay, this is rounded, smooth, prominent surfaces, dammed some of the valleys with drift, did not modify the general surface greatly. Glacial and interglacial stream erosion probably enlarged some pre-existing channels. Sandpoil probably contained very large stream at the time. Okay? Two levels of glaciation are also distinctly shown at Twin Lakes. Is he saying there are two batches of ice, an older ice advance and a younger ice advance? I guess I'm not sure as I read this with you. He's estimating elevations, thicknesses of the ice sheet, 5,000 feet, 4,000 feet when it gets to the Columbia. All right. Yeah, the Haystack Rocks. These guys are on horseback, 1912, 1913. It's 5 years later when they published the report. We're just up there doing a video. Okay. So, I don't know if this is working for you. We're done with Pardee for now. But he is mapped north and he is mapped east of Spokane. And now he's brought in to this world that Thomas Large is trying to figure out. And Pardee's comments and Pardee's mapping and Pardee's ideas are valued by his experience. He's not just in a classroom and then coming out and trying to figure it out. He's mapped for many summers, glacial deposits. Very good. Okay, to Spokane we go. And I think we're ready for Thomas Large, are we? Yes, we are. Okay. So, most of the rest of the program, thank you for your patience, is devoted to Thomas Large, science teacher, Lewis and Clark High School. Beautiful old photo sent to me by Brian who is a great-grandson of Thomas Large. Brian might be with us today in the live chat. This is the same Brian from Portland who paid to get the scans of the Brett's notes from the University of Chicago. He's a descendant, a direct descendant of Thomas Large. Thank you, Brian. Also, John, who lives in Ellensburg. John has come to some of my lectures over the years, and John is a great-grandson of Thomas Large as well. So there's a connection that way as well. Okay, it's story time. Ready for a little story time? It involves the viewers. So I'd known for years about Thomas Large, but I had minimal information about him. Vic Baker, who's going to be a guest in a couple of weeks, who was O'Connor's advisor at Tucson, Arizona, and Vic Baker is one of the most famous geologists living today who met Brett's and has spent a whole career devoted to the Ice Age floods. So Vic Baker has been encouraging of anybody wanting to look into this stuff, including me. So when I got on to this Lewis and Clark High School business, Vic said, well, I've done a little bit of digging. I've met Brian, the great-grandson, a couple of times. Brian has some access to some of these notes at the University of Oregon, but I'll connect you to Brian and maybe you can take this a little further. And each time I would see Vic Baker at a conference, he'd say, any new stuff on Thomas Large? In other words, he feels like there is part of the story there that's been underdeveloped. Okay, well, that's kind of where it left, and I thought maybe this winter I'd be able to learn somehow a little bit more about Thomas Large. So, it's January 12th, but on December 20th, when we were taking a break from this live stream series, I was home with our kids playing board games every day. All the neighbor kids were there. You know, everybody's in their late 20s, early 30s, but it's a full house and it's a fun time. I disappeared one afternoon. You know, I just needed some quiet time. And I was thinking about the live stream series. And I came into the office on December 20th, and I made this video. It's 20 minutes long. It was a live stream. And I said, hey, viewers, this one's not going to stay on the YouTube channel, but I've got a few asks of you. And one of the asks of this video, just a few weeks ago, was, does anybody live in the Eugene, Oregon area? And would you be willing to go on campus and find these papers of Thomas Large? And maybe you could actually see a few of those papers of Large's, and maybe you could, email me a few photos taken with your iPhone of what you found. I thought maybe one or two people might drive into the day and just see if they could find a couple things. Well, Jody in Eugene is the hero today. Jody in Eugene, a full week before that Ask video, said, well, Sharon and Malaga found out that Thomas Large's papers had been donated to the University of Oregon's Night Library Special Collection. And I was thinking about that in the middle of the night on December 13th. This is viewer Jody from Eugene. And she said, you know what, I could just go down to, I could try to figure out, this is before I was even asking for this thing. And Jody said, I tried to request a reservation online, but I failed. And so then 2 days before my Ask video with the red shirt, I went into the library to get some personal help, and the staff was outstandingly helpful from the circulation desk to the special collections department, and I managed to get reservation for 4 boxes, and they were sent from the archives available to me the next day. Please give them a big shout out. Big shout out to the University of Oregon's special collection staff. Maybe some of you are watching at the University of Oregon. So the Night Special Collection staff has been thrilled with the increased patron interest, and they have been fielding calls about accessing the papers. And when I showed up, they were curious about this mysterious geologist who had been sent out a call for help in determining what was in the papers. They were wonderfully helpful. And if you want, if other people want to go see what they have on their shelves, they would be happy to work with you, viewers. Okay, so Jody beat me to the punch. She read my mind, basically, and was already ready to roll. But after that red shirt Ask video on December 20th, I got 6 or 7 emails from different people who lived in Western Oregon, and they said, I can help, I can go in there, and I would just forward their emails to Jody. And so, as Jody says, Jody started coordinating by email with these other viewers who she didn't know. They happened to just meet in the reading room, and they're like, Zentner, okay, yeah, okay, well, let's get into this. You take folder 1, I'll take folder 2, we'll go through, we'll snap photos, we'll send them to Zentner. And before we knew it, we had a whole Eugene team of viewers who were coming on different days over the holiday break and even into the new year. So I have a slide here. So here's the two of the young staff people at the special collections place. This is Jody. I hope Jody's with us today. Here's 3 different generations of people. Jody, Chris, Lucy, Yasmin, Don. I've not met any of these people, but most of them are from the Eugene area. John drove down from Marquam, Oregon more than once, and collectively these guys spent 50 hours going through the Thomas Large papers, and all of those papers have been sent to me. Not physically, but iPhone snaps of these photos, and a few scanned things as well. So all I can say is thank you publicly. I've been very appreciative by email, of course. And am I going to share 50 hours worth of reading with you today? Of course not. I don't have time. But a few of the documents are going to be used today, and a few of the Thomas Large documents from this Eugene team will be used over the next few letters as well. It is exciting. It is exciting, and yet another manifestation of this viewer engagement that we have here in this community. I see a lot of thumbs, or I see a lot of hearts going up here in the live chat. I agree. Is that the right side for my heart? Do I have a heart? I think I have a heart. Keep it going. Thank you, Eugene team. Okay, so here's article number 1. I don't think we had this photo before. This is from the Eugene team, and this is shortly after the summer of 1922. So this is what you can visualize for Thomas Large in the middle of this drama of 1922. Okay. It's going to be a little scattered now. I'm going to be a little bit scattered, going back and forth between Docky and the slides. But I want to tell this Thomas Large story. I have a general idea how I want to do it. We've done some geology. We're doing a little bit of Spokane geology coming, but obviously we're working in human history as well, courtesy of the Eugene team. Docky. If we have some of the Eugene team with us live, or if we have Brian, the grandson, or John, the grandson, maybe they can add some things in the live chat. But here's what I've been able to put together. Brian and John, great-grandsons of Thomas Large. Large, yet another Midwestern guy, born in 1872. There's some drama in his life. He lost 2 different wives to illness, I believe. And so I'll just give you some cliff notes here. He did some teaching in the Chicago area as a high school teacher in Chicago area, Oak Park. Lost his wife, took his kids, moved out to southern Idaho, near Eden, Idaho. This is like Jerome, Twin Falls, that kind of thing. At age 37, raised these kids by himself and farmed. And had a new wife in 1910. These are census figures here. The census of 1920, he lost that wife. And then here he is, I believe it's 1921, at age 50, that I guess he's done raising his kids. He has a new lease on life. Thomas Large we're talking about now. And he shows up at Lewis and Clark High School to try to do his best with this new area. He moves into a house, or maybe it's a new house or whatever. He buys a house for the first time in 1903. This was his address for the rest of his life. It used to be called this, and then I guess by the 1930s, Spokane changed the way they numbered their streets or whatever, so this is the address today. He, at age 65, marries a fellow high school teacher at the high school, Ruth Fiskin, who was a fine arts teacher, because he lost another wife in there somewhere. and passes away in Spokane with widow Ruth, St. Patrick's Day, 1951, at age 79. Thomas Large. Okay, that's a thumbnail sketch of his life. Let's hear from him directly as he's writing letters to people where he's trying to drum up interest in the Spokane geology in the early 1920s. Reading time. Hang in there. This is Thomas Large, a letter to somebody, courtesy of the Eugene team. I deplore my tendency to be personal on slight provocation, but as your interest seems to be in those of us who have been attempting research while teaching in smaller schools, I will give some details. I do not lack the background of university contacts. Some 8 years connection with the Indiana, Illinois, and Chicago gave opportunity for work under a dozen or more outstanding biologists, together with numerous contacts with others in various scientific fields should have been borne better fruits. I gave up an instructorship under a person, Davenport, owing to family illness, and I went to Oak Park, Illinois High School to develop the field of elementary science for beginning high school students, resulting in what was then known as the Oak Park idea, from what stemmed the vast number of texts trying to tell the poor kids about science. My work has been to get them to open their eyes and to try to think through to the why things happen. But we found out that surprisingly things could happen begotten with beginners if they were not told too much. And after 6 years, I resigned, more than anything else, from fright of being responsible for 3 motherless youngsters on the edge of a great city. I took them to a sagebrush farm in the new irrigated country near Twin Falls, Idaho. I promise there's a reason to do this as well, everybody. There I spent 12 years teaching a little, doing various things, but principally farming. Returning to university was impossible, but at the end of the war, a chance to come to the LCHS in Spokane offered and was accepted. I was 50 years old, but the farm had done something for me as well as for my children. I think it was that I was no longer a shrinking and fearful schoolmarm. I was given a few classes in the new general science. This is now at Lewis and Clark High School. I got to shut this frickin' door. Hang on. Sorry for the interruption. He's now at Lewis and Clark High School, 1921. Hard to read. This is cut off just a little bit. I told them things about the physiography. All the Spokane teachers were quite non-committal about the physiographic features of the Spokane region. They were interesting and peculiar. The first year I wrote 12 mimeographed pages to direct my pupils. And after that, I had been in the city 6 or 7 months. I was invited to give a talk to Associated Engineers of Spokane on their own geology. As I stated before, I was fearless. I had never had 1 hour of instruction in geology. He was self-taught, just like Brett's was, basically. I taught physiography of the region to them and challenged the great Chamberlain and Salisbury's text of geology in their statement that certainly ground ice had not reached as far south as Spokane. I had found ice work as far as 20 miles south of Spokane. Okay, so here's where I think it's a test of you or whatever. Here's somebody who never took a geology class, and he's giving talks and eventually writing papers on the geology of the Spokane area. Now, are you willing to listen to this guy without the proper credentials? That is certainly an element here as to why he is not a big part of the story. I don't want to say there's snobbery, but he's a high school teacher. He teaches biology. He's brand new to Spokane. Why am I going to listen? Why am I going to give this guy the time of day? And yet Pardee and Brett show up within a year of this guy showing up in Spokane to check things out. I don't quite understand why they're motivated to work with this biology teacher. Maybe he's just a persuasive guy. Yep. I had found ice work as far as 20 miles south of Spokane, evidence that at least 2 ice invasions, ice found at least 2 ice invasions had crossed the Spokane Valley, and that above the ice barrier, a lake intending to Lake Pend Oreille had filled the valley above the lake. These papers reached University of Chicago and USGS. Each sent representatives to see. Bretz of Chicago and Pardee of the USGS. Pardee could see nothing. Bretz, after a few days in the field in 1922, agreed with everything I had stated. Following this lead, Bretz had turned every summer for the next 8 years working out the Spokane flood and the Scablands theory, precipitating the greatest controversy in geology of the last 2 decades. Okay, so Large obviously wrote that after the fact. He didn't write it in 1922, but he's reflecting on the fact that I'm going to read some more stuff to you in a second. It's going to get sluggish now. If you hate the old letters and me reading to you, you're going to hate this next part. But I find it fascinating, and we have the narrative now. We have the hooks to care deeply about these old letters. I hope that's the model of this whole thing. So Pardee, okay. And I need full disclosure. I don't know Spokane geology very well myself. So I'm going to be leaning on the viewers a little bit before Sunday, I think, to help me, because I don't think I totally have the geography straight and some of these concepts. I've done the best I can in the last 48 hours to work it out. What do I want to do? Yeah. So Thomas mentioned whatever he said. One of the first things he did in the fall of 1921 was listen to all these ideas that McMacken and Troth, his colleagues at the high school, had about the local area. They're amateurs too. But Large is like, what? What are you guys saying? Show me this, show me that. What? About just in the Spokane area. And Large typed up these notes for himself, and this is the document that really helped me understand what he was thinking initially in 1921, before he had Bretz and Large come to Spokane, before he had Bretz and Pardee come to Spokane. And also, this is the document where I hear my dad's voice as I'm reading this document from Thomas Large. Just notes for his high school teaching. You have this one. It's faint print. It's from the Eugene team. Somebody, whether it's Large's family or whatever, donated this to the Spokane Public Library. There's a stamp here which I don't totally understand. It says November something 1921. So did this go to the library right away? Did Large write this for his high school students and then said, I'll put a copy of this on reserve at the library or something? I don't know. But I've obviously got a color scheme here, and I'm going to try to go back and forth between this document, just portions of it, and some cartoons that I made for myself. And this is the part that you might be able to help me better. Terrible grammar. This is the part that if you know Spokane geology and geography, or if you're a very sharp person and you have skills, you might email me, if you have the time and interest, in the next 48 hours before Sunday's show, something a little better than what I've sketched out. Or you can even correct me if I'm totally wrong on a couple of things that I'm trying to do here. Let's do it. Geology in the Spokane region. Written for the general science classes at the high school. An understanding of the geologic features of the Spokane region must include ability to recognize and identify 5 different kinds of material with some reasonable explanation of their presence and of the conditions and locations in which they are found. These materials are 1, the lavas, 2, the gravels, 3, the fossil-bearing shale, 4, the granite, and 5, the peaty soils. And then he tries to comment just by basic relationships in the field of relative ages. I'll spare you that and instead cut to a diagram that is possibly accurate. So he's saying in Spokane, we've got this, he didn't know these dates, Very, very old. We now think older than 30 million years ago. This is the crazy Eocene granites and metamorphic rocks, those core complexes that you might remember from 2 winters ago, and even Cretaceous granites and metamorphic rocks. Doesn't matter. The point is we have this very old bedrock that was heavily incised before the Columbia River basalt lavas. Then he's reasoning out that these lavas and interbedded sedimentary beds, the John Day beds, quote unquote, locally known as the Latah beds, those are the fossil-bearing shales in between. This is all the Miocene time. Notice that there's relief cut into the old rocks to then lay in the basalt. You're like, why didn't the German chocolate cake flood everything here? Well, it probably did on the one hand, but also we're at the true margins of the basalt field. So at Spokane, we're really at the edge of the German chocolate cake. So the overall thickness of the cake is quite thin in this northeastern part of the cake. But obviously we're headed towards blue and red. And I want to read that portion of his class notes to you. In a way, somebody is a savant here at this high school, whether it's Troth or McMacken or Large himself as a quick study in just a few months after arriving in Spokane. A newly energized 50-year-old guy putting all this together. Or all three of them are very, very sharp. But I'm going to give you a chance to hear and read with me an imagination of connecting the dots between these high elevation things that look like glacial deposits to Large. And then this is the thing I'm most fuzzy about. I think he's talking about also some glacial deposits down low in this incised Spokane Valley that are quite a bit younger. You know the colors now. This is stage 6 and stage 2. This is 150,000. This is 20,000 as we view it today. Yeah, let's go to it. Is this working? Can I pause? Is this working? I'm having a great time. Continued chatter out in the hallway, so you're getting a good shot of my winter coat. Not only are we 5x5, but are we into this? I just need to check in with you. And there's extra delay with this new setup here. Wow. A lot of, hey, Sky's with us. Hi, Sky. Sharon from Malaga is with us. Hi, Sharon. Okay, great. I just need to get used to, if we're 5x5, terrific. We don't have a crackling microphone, great. There's just an extra delay between, a longer delay between my voice and it coming through. Now we've got it. Okay, good. Thank you. Let's keep going. So here's the most important part. So he's into talking about the granites, they must be old. The lavas and the fossil-bearing shales, they must be old, says Large. Again, mostly coached up by his colleagues McMacken and Troth. Old, don't care. Now he gets into the glacial stuff, some interesting comments, but it's not the most... Where's the part? Yeah, here it is. This is the part that worked for me. And again, you've got this whole document to read carefully if you like. Classic high school teacher. This is Carl Zentner now. While resting for some time, choose a point from which a wide view of the landscape may be had. And note and compare, high school students, the height of the opposite wall with the level on which you stand. Find out how far southward the plateau extends. A USGS topographic map of the Spokane Quadrangle, you've got it from 1901 at nickzentner.com, will prove helpful here. This will show that the top of the plateau is at about 2,400 foot elevation. While resting at 29th Avenue, again look for the top of the line of the plateau across the canyon in the region of Sunset Boulevard, Sunset Highway, and follow it northward as far as the Granite Hills at the mouth of the Little Spokane. Then go across the valley at the Spokane River. Note that the level of the plateau continues eastward. This is 5 Mile Prairie. Later, from some vantage point on the Cannon Hill, note that this is plateau. After an eruption on the east side of 5-mile prairie is continued eastward in Peony Prairie and Pleasant Prairie. An examination of these other portions of the plateau for the character of its surface and underlying materials would prove interesting. Imagine a level, students. Imagine a level plateau extending over the valleys of Little Spokane River, Hangman Creek, and Spokane River. And then please imagine these streams much larger than at present. And beginning to eat away at the plateau, you will have a stage of history which succeeded the first flow of the lava. And then we got to consider what made the plateau to begin with. I don't know how much further I'm going to go with those concepts, but if you have a good memory, we had Jerome Lessman on right before Christmas talking about Bretz's mapping on the southern margin of the Puget Lobe. And Jerome pointed out in that show, Bretz has these individual prairies mapped out in South Puget Sound. We're at the margin of the ice sheet, and we're connecting those prairies and imagining a continuous prairie, which was in Jerome's idea and Bretz's idea, a continuous body of glacial drift, saying that we're at the edge of an ice sheet. Well, Bretz hasn't even showed up, and Large is talking about the same thing. Isolated prairies, separated today, but once continuous. Do you like this sketch, everybody? I say, do you like this sketch, everybody? This is my attempt, using our color scheme, to connect those prairies. Do you know these prairies in Spokane? Paradise Prairie, Moran Prairie, Sunset Prairie, Indian Prairie, 4-Mile Prairie, 5-Mile Prairie, Pleasant Prairie, Green Bluff Prairie, Orchard Bluff Prairie, Scabland Prairie. Downtown Spokane is here. The high school is here. But Large and the rest of the high school teachers are imagining that this is all glacial ice sheet deposit material, and therefore we need the margin of the Spokane ice sheet. What the hell happened to the Spokane ice sheet? This is the Spokane ice sheet as it's mapped back in the 1920s. It gets to the Cheney Hills. The Spokane ice sheet gets to the Dishman Hills, but it does not go further south than that. This is the stage 6, 150,000 year advance. So the cross-sectional view, where most of it is missing, that's why Large is asking his students, can you imagine, can you connect the dots, young people? Hey, young people, can you connect the dots between that high plateau and that high plateau? Was it all once continuous as an older ice advance? And then that ice sheet goes away. We bring in the Vashon in Western Washington. We bring in the Okanagan lobe, or whatever the name of the lobe is here. Is it the Spokane lobe, I guess? Stage 2, I don't know how far, in the 20s, I don't know how close to Spokane Large and everybody wants it, and where Bretz wants it. But I wouldn't waste your time with this. I wouldn't waste your time with this if it weren't for Jay Hall and Brett showing up in the next summer. And as we just read in Large's letter, Brett's is like, yeah, sounds good, man. Brett's is like, I see it. I'm looking at pan tops in these other places, and I see glacial deposits, and sure, I'm going to put my ice margin here as well. And yet Large, in the letter that we just read, said Pardee didn't see it. But I'm confused, because I thought Pardee had some... I'm confused. All right, I'm kind of right where I want to be. Where do I go next? It's a good question. Let's go back to the slides, trigger the next thought. So I don't have any letter where Large is communicating directly with Pardee and begging him to come. And I don't have any letter from Large to Brett's begging him to come. I would like to see those letters. They're probably gone for good. They might be in the University of Chicago, but I don't know. This is probably within a few weeks of Large arriving in Spokane, and immediately he's writing the USGS and like, He already wrote a letter on August 19th. He's basically like, can you guys help me out? I'm trying to teach high school science here. I don't know what the hell's going on with the geology around here. Can you send somebody, please? And the USGS says, well, you can check out some bulletins by I.C. Russell in Idaho and parts of Washington. You can maybe try something else from Central Washington. In other words, they're being of no help, basically. Yeah, how about you look in these other papers? How about you can find some books by I.C. Russell on volcanoes from North America? It reminds me of 30 years ago, before the internet, when a farmer would come into my office in the old building, and they'd have all these specific questions about their property out by the Columbia River over by Vantage or something, and I'd go, well, I don't know, here's a Geology 101 book, maybe it can help you. They're like, well, I don't need a Geology 101 book. Don't you know anything about the geology over around Vantage? And I'm like, not really. I was not helpful to so many people who had questions 20, 30 years ago. Just like the USGS is here with this Thomas Large guy. I don't know who this is, the director of the USGS, I guess. He's like, yeah, can't help you. But I guess they eventually did, because they sent Pardee. Back to Large. My first interest in the geology of the Spokane region began with it was necessary to instruct general science students under my charge in the cause of the peculiar features of landscape to be seen about Spokane. To my surprise, no one was willing to talk about these features, except in the most general terms. And as none of the local scientists wrote anything in print about their conclusions, nor would it be definite about anything related to the formations here, it became necessary, in order that I should have anything definite to teach to the young folks, to put my own observations of a few months since my arrival in Spokane in form for use. That's what we were just looking at. As I have never studied geology in class or under instruction, it was like the blind leading the blind. However, my observation told me that we were at the edge of the great Columbia lava flows, and that to the north and eastward of the city were crystalline rocks, granites. Okay, good, yep. This much seems certain, but also gravels, clays, and quote-unquote traveled boulders were all about, which I had associated with the Mississippi Valley with glacial deposits when he taught way back in the Midwest. No one seemed to know just how recent the lava flows had been. Another puzzling thing was they were related to the nature of these outcroppings. Oh, he's still talking about lava. We don't care. So he wrote this paper that we just looked at as class notes just for his students. And now here we go. So this came in last night. Brian, are you with us? Brian, the great-grandson of Thomas Large. Brian in Portland. If you are and you're comfortable being public here, please identify yourself and please add what you know, because you have seen all those papers at the University of Oregon. And Brian, you have been to the University of Chicago doing your own research on your great-grandpa. And you can definitely add to what's going on. And if you're not here, thank you for watching this replay, Brian, and thank you for all of the help that you've sent over the years, not just in the middle of the night last night. But Brian, after digging, found this. The only photo that I know of the Pantops quarry. And this is the first place that Brett's arrives. If we take a few moments late today, or maybe we'll start it on Sunday, we will go to Pantops with Google Earth by Glenn. This doesn't exist anymore, but these are the kinds of deposits. I think I even zoom in here. Yeah. These are crucial to the story. Does this look like glacial till deposited directly by the ice? Maybe Jerome Lessman will say no. Maybe Jim O'Connor will say no. Does this look like, for sure, Missoula flood deposits? But the point is, scattered. The point is, we are up high with these deposits. Come on, man. I'm showing you a black and white photo from the Pantops Quarry, which is up high. And the narrative that's getting emerged is that this is an older ice advance from the famous among us, Spokane ice sheet. And does everybody agree at some point later in the 1920s and 1930s that this is also red? That this is all red and not blue? And another question is, how does the narrative change between how much of this prairie material is ice deposited and how much of this material is water deposited? In other words, is this a bunch of Ice Age flood deposits, not just regular old ice sheet glacial till? Sky maybe has some thoughts. We got some other folks. Is Brian here? There's too many Brians to keep track of, maybe? Okay. I'm approaching, I think, the end. Although I don't really quite. Oh, no, I'm not. Hang on. So I think it's official. We're saving the Brett's part of this until the next show. In fact, we'll even skip over a little bit of the Brett's 1922 stuff now, even though we're going to Pantops. I think bringing Brett's in now is going to be too confusing, I think. But I want to jump to the fall of 1922, where Thomas is publishing on the Spokane ice deposits. Frank Leverett is depositing on some glacial tills south of Spokane that's from an earlier advance that he's calling the Kansan advance. And our buddy Joseph Pardee, after doing 6 weeks of field work in 1921, is chiming in as well. And I think they're all saying, yeah, we got glacial till at Spokane, which is not the story that we have any longer. So I think that I just decided that's what I'm doing. Let's go to the slides and see if I agree with that. Pantops, key spot. Large is writing a bunch about Pantops. Brett's is writing a bunch about Pantops in the paper that we'll read on Sunday. Jim O'Connor said, maybe I'll join you live today. I'm not sure. I did skim some of the large. This is the guest from last show. I do think the Spokane glaciation mostly derived from misinterpretation, assuming the flood hypothesis stands, of the gravel and lake deposits to the Spokane Valley, in particular the eddy bars blocking the side valley lakes, and valley ice dam interpretation for the lacustrine deposits in Hangman Creek, and the evidence for water spills south out of the valley. Number one, Jim, I hope you're not pissed off that I shared your email with everybody. I find it very interesting to hear the current views versus these ideas 100 years ago. So it's instructive. And I don't understand half of that because I haven't read those locations yet. And we're saving water until Sunday. So Jim's like, that's the last time I'm emailing you, bro. Yeah. Campbell's brought in here. Thomas, in the summer of 1922 is, I'll read it. Thomas Larch, the editor of the Science magazine. The investigation began with the discovery of some evidence of glaciation on the Basalt Plateau about Spokane, some 400 or 500 feet above the train of the Valley Glacier in the Spokane Valley. Is that the Wisconsin? Is there red Valley Glacier stuff in the valley and blue glacial deposits up high? That's what I'm wondering. Examination proved that all of these prairies occupying this plateau bore evidence of the form of erratic boulders, gravel, sand, and clay, and depths varying from nothing to 15 feet or more. Thank you. What appeared to be marginal moraine was found on the south side of the valley at Pantops. It seemed that the valley of Spokane must have been completely dammed. Okay, now we're getting to water. Let's save it till Sunday. This is Thomas talking to the people at the Science magazine. He is bringing out the Wisconsin glaciation. Okay. Yeah. Okay, yeah, we are there. I'm going to share. We're done with the slides. Oh, shit, are we? Hang on. Sorry, Patrick. I can't hold it. I can't hold it. So here's Eric from Seattle, who was working on a Brett's and high school teachers book. And Eric lost his momentum and has been sharing some things with me. So Eric in Seattle went to the University of Chicago. And here are some of Brett's old notebooks. But I find this fascinating now because, I don't know, we get Brett's to Spokane in August 1st of 1922. Look at this page from Brett's notebook. To me, this is Brett's meeting Thomas Large for the first time, maybe in his home. And Brett's is like, okay, well, where do I need to go, Thomas? You've been here all of 9 months. Can you give me some leads, some tips? I read your paper. I'm interested in this Spokane story. And the way I'm reading this, I could be wrong. Thomas is like, okay, well, there's Mr. Patton, who's an agricultural agent. There's Dr. Merrill at the Medical Lake Custodial School. There's Miss Martin at the Cheney Normal School. I may be way off. I just like imagining Thomas like giving all these orders to Brett's. Principal Showalter, Mr. Henry Fair, the 3rd floor of City Hall at the water inspection plant. Mr. Armstrong, who's a mining engineer. He's in the something building downtown. Bonzer is at the City Museum here in Spokane. Hey, man, I think we got water leaking through at Cliff Park, Flagpole Hill, and these 2 locations, or maybe that's where the ice is plugging these gaps. But I've got Micah Call, and I've got 2 outlets of water, and so on and so on. So we're back to the original question. How much attention, how much respect, how much credit should be given to Thomas Large? And I think he was a rather humble guy. And if Thomas Large was here right now in the live chat, I would say, Thomas, how much were you part of this story? Did Brett take all of your ideas and just run with them and never give you any credit, Thomas? Were they not your ideas, but your co-workers at the high school, Troth and McMacken, and you're just kind of a facilitator between your co-workers down the hall and Brett's and Pardee? Were you treated fairly, Thomas? You had a good relationship with Brett's all through the 1920s and 30s. We have the letters we're going to look at in the next few letters. Maybe everything's fine. Maybe it's not a bad story at all. But are you really sitting down, Brett's, in front of your dining room table on August 1st and saying, Brett's, we got water here. We got water leaking to the south from this Lake Spokane. You got to look into this water. Now I'm just playing. Just Thomas Large on August 1st, 1922 said, Brett's, I read your 1919 paper on the Columbia submergence. I don't think it's seawater. Harley, it's nice to meet you. It's fresh water. We got water leaking out of our hills south of Spokane, and it's heading to the Columbia Gorge, Harley. Switch your mind up, bro. We're saving this for Sunday, but this is how Brett's got around in 1922, courtesy of Joel in Sacramento, who took all the detailed notes of the Brett's notebooks that have been made public on nickzentner.com and made a beautiful custom-made map and showing that Brett's traveled everywhere in 1922, either by train or by walking. No car travel in 1922. So it seems clear from Glenn in Spokane, who's read the notes better than anybody at this point. I emailed Glenn. I said, hey, man, do you think Thomas Large loaned his car to Brett's in 1922? And he's like, I don't think so. I think in 1923, but not 1922, based on his detailed notes. We're coming to you, viewers, with some uppercase, but I've got one more little tidbit for you. a couple more tidbits for you. One is this. Apparently written in the fall of 1922, cursive now, by Thomas Large. The southern and western limits of glaciation in Washington have been studied by the writer, and this problem is cheerfully turned over to Mr. Pardee of the USGS and Professor Bretz of Chicago University, who have been making investigations along this line in the past summer. However, it seems clear that an ice field extended southward, unbroken, as far as the range of hills to the south of Cheney, but apparently did not go over the tops of these hills. He makes it official, Thomas Large does, in September 22nd, 1922 issue of the magazine Science. You have this one to read, but he's writing to the editor of Science, because of general interest in the subject of glaciation and the origin of polluted soils, the writer in the 12 months past in the region of Spokane may merit the attention of your readers. The investigation began with the discovery of glaciation on the basalt plateau about Spokane, some 400 to 500 feet above the train of Valley Glacier in Spokane Valley, described by Campbell in 1916. Here's the prairies occupying the plateau, erratic boulders, gravel, sand, and clay, depths varying from nothing to 15 feet. We already know all this, but he's making it formal in a national publication. Specific spots where water from the front of the ice is leaking out. He's separating out the Wisconsin period of glaciation. Joseph Pardee spent 6 weeks in May of June of this year, 1922, careful study of the glaciation and related subjects. The appearances of the report is awaited with great interest. Apparently, Pardee never published on that. I need to follow up on that story. That was September. Here's October from Frank Leverett, who's back in the Midwest. The communication by Thomas Large, whoever the hell that is, on the above subject in September 22 issue of Science prompts me to write that in 1916 I was out in Washington and I found till with striated boulders and pebbles in the brickyard near the normal school at Cheney, Washington, beyond the limits of here reported by Large. I told everybody about this at the GSA meeting in Albany, New York in December of 1916. In northern Washington, the occurrence of a very old drift, probably Kansan, now is that stage 12 or stage 16 possibly from Joel Gombiner, was established by the discovery of till and striated stones on a high divide southwest of Spokane in the vicinity of Cheney. He brings up Campbell as well. And if you're curious about Leverett, he started his career in 1886, hired as a field assistant by T.C. Chamberlain. Leverett was a field assistant until 1890, then an assistant geologist with the survey. Then he started being a lecturer at the, you guessed it, University of Michigan. These are notes from Sharon in Malaga. Thank you, Sharon. Yeah. Another month later, who's reading the Science magazine? Our buddy Pardee, December 15th. Communications of the above subject, glaciation in the Cordilleran region, by Thomas Large and Frank Leverett, have appeared. To these, the writer wishes to add that during May and June of 1922, before Brett showed up on August 1st, Pardee found glacial drift, including till, with striated stones, similar to that mentioned by Leverett, and many other places on the Columbia Plateau, west and southwest of Spokane. The writer expects to study the region further and to publish the results later on. I guess it didn't happen. But the information now at hand is sufficient to warrant the statement that during one or more comparatively early stages of the Pleistocene ice from the north advanced over the Columbia Plateau in a southwesterly direction. Concerning the glacial drift, which, by the way, is not the only evidence the region affords that the land ice was formerly present, the alternative idea is that it was brought to place by floating ice, aha, or running water, aha. And those have been considered and rejected. Large patches of the drift may be seen southwest of Cheney, west of Lance, neighborhood of Winona, La Crosse, and Colotis. These occurrences being selective. Okay, so I'm reading some of this for the first time with you. So I'm confused. Large said, Bretz came to Spokane and agreed with everything I was saying. Large said that Pardee came to Spokane and pretty much didn't agree with anything I was saying. But here he's saying, yeah, there's a bunch of ice and not that much water. It gets complicated about who's saying what during these very crucial months. And you're like, who cares what they're saying? Let me remind you. Let's go back to the whole theme of this winter. Am I trying to piss people off? No. Am I trying to learn new things? Yeah, I'm learning all sorts of new things, thanks to the Eugene team and everybody else. But I'm also wondering what happened to the narrative of the Spokane ice sheet. And is it just lost in translation? Or lost due to new techniques and new papers, and we just conveniently forget about the old papers because they're old and probably out of date? And so that's why we're going through this stuff with a fine-tooth comb. It's fun, and it's fun to see the evolution of thought. And Bretz hasn't even done his famous work yet. Questions for you. Questions from you. It's time for some live Q&A with the viewers, and then possibly we'll throw in a few tidbits that I've forgotten that I have related to today's show. There's some enhanced notes, there's some other things. I might save those till Sunday, I'm not sure. I'm ready, even though there's an extra long delay. I'm ready for your live questions. Thank you so much. I'm feeling so good at the moment because apparently the AV is strong, and I pretty much shared what I wanted to share today. And hopefully I've done the hard workers in Eugene, Oregon proud. Questions, please, uppercase. Did Thomas Large write about giant current ripples? Who did? Okay, Kyle, thank you for the question. I'm going to try to be disciplined here today. Maybe it's impossible to stay disciplined, but I just want to stick with the ice story today and not try to peek at in the story, but maybe that's ridiculous. What did Bretz think of Thomas Large? Well, we will learn as we go by looking at these letters between the two of them. There was affection there for sure. I'll give you a sneak peek. Bretz felt crappy on Sunday's show that he ruined Large's car and sent him money to buy a new car and said, if you don't use it all, just send the balance back to me. They had a good relationship, perhaps because they were both fellow high school teachers. Philip, sea level changes impact on river depths? Oh, that's an interesting thought, but we're 500 miles from the ocean. I'm not bright enough to think of sea level changes impacting how the Spokane River is behaving, Philip. Sorry. What was it about Pantops? It was an open, as I understand it, Mike, and others can chime in. And you know how this works. There'll be stuff in the live chat. There'll be comments down below. There'll be emails sent to me from people who know Spokane geology, gently saying, you were way off on that. You should have said this, or you check this out. So I'm going to continue to learn just from doing this show with everybody. But all I can do is share what I think I know at the moment, Mike. Pantops is essentially the first place that Bretz looks at on August 1st, 1922. And I don't think it's an accident. I think there was a huge open quarry there, pretty close to where Thomas Large lived. And Large probably said, let's take the train over there and I'll show you one of these places that are correlative with all these prairies. So I think Pantops is up high along with everybody else on top of this great lava plain that's been dissected since then. How did he wreck the car? You got to tune in Sunday. I don't think we even know. Richard. Okay, so let's do that. So I'll read Richard's comment and then I'll share with you Richard and Dean's publication. Large 1943 science article says that he'd been working on the question for 18 months before the 1922 student paper and the second paper presented. Okay, there's a discrepancy there, Richard. Yeah, because I noticed in your publication, which I'm about to share, that Richard, you and Dean are saying that Large came in 1920, the fall of 1920. I don't know if it matters that much. It maybe makes more sense that you have a little more time to learn the local story. But let's do that, since Richard and Dean are both here. They are viewers, but they are not viewers, and they were not working on Thomas Large's story and the Lewis and Clark High School teacher's story because of me, I don't think. I caught wind of Richard and Dean working on a new publication 6 months ago, maybe, something like that, fellas. And I have that for you to look at. Let's go to it. So if we go to nickzentner.com, thank you for your patience, guys, if you were here just to chime in on your work. So I think we're going to save the Brett's link until Sunday. We're going to floods in the upper right-hand corner. Here's the old quadrangle that might be helpful to you. There's the Pardee paper in 1910. There's the other Pardee paper that I read to you from. Here are those class notes that Large put together. This is a paper that we have not looked at, but you can look at, which I think this was published in December of 1922, so this is after Brett's had spent his month, called Glacial Border of Spokane. Go back. Here are those small things that I read to you quickly in Science Magazine, Large, and then Leverett, and then Pardee. But this is the thing I want to share to you. So both of the authors here, both Richard Sola and Dean Kiefer, are with us in the live chat today. Thank you, both of you, for showing up today. And you will all get a bunch of background on the staff at the high school. You'll get a good feel for Spokane in the 20s and in the teens and why it was such a happening place. It's an area even today still called the Inland Empire. And I don't totally have the backstory on these two fellows, but believe they're both retirement age and just decided they wanted to write this little book. And so you have the whole book, courtesy of these two guys. So there's a good reading here. And feel free to print this out and read it. And I supplied them with some Tom Foster photos and things of that nature. I don't know, we did mention Pantops enough. Maybe we'll do a little Google Earth by Glenn before we quit today. John Nash, how much has the terrain rebounded from the number 6 ice sheet retreat? Good question. Don't know. I don't know how much isostatic rebound keeps coming into that, John. Thank you. Let's go back and look for some more uppercase. We'll do a few more before we go to Google Earth by Glenn. Is Glenn still with us? Do the ice advances correlate with the timing of the big earthquakes? I don't think so. Thank you for the question. Is there, Pat Miller from Yakima, is there evidence of a moraine associated with the Spokane lobe? Interesting question. I think it was clear in the Puget Lowland that the Puget lobe, whether it was stage 6 or stage 2, had very wimpy moraines. And I think the same would be true there for Spokane. Like it's almost a hallmark of the Cordilleran ice sheet for whatever reason. I'm trying to think if Jerome said something like this. These huge terminal moraines that mark the edge of the ice, I think that's a Midwest thing. I think that's a Laurentide ice sheet thing for whatever reason. And so to look for this super large moraine marking the edge, what was that? Oh, this? This is a new hand gesture. If there was a huge terminal moraine south of Spokane, I don't think anybody would be arguing, Pat. So I think it ultimately comes down to that. Large and Bretts and others are looking at this glacial drift in the Spokane area and interpreting as it a moraine. A leaky moraine with some water coming through and wiping out some parts of the moraine, quote unquote. And I guess the thumbnail version is, in the last 50 years, people say, that's not a moraine. I don't think it's even stage 6. I think that's all just Missoula flood stuff, stage 2, that's come through there. And it was just misinterpreted by a couple of high school teachers. But Bretts is agreeing, at least for a while. Oh, God. I didn't know about that one. It's fun to find these by accident. I'm down to live. 2 more uppercase. I'm so happy right now. VCBC Outdoorsman, VIBC Outdoorsman. Any erratics outside of the high water marks of the 2.6 million year ice age flood? 2.6 million years? What are you talking about, man? That's too old. Kevin, Nick, in the 1920s, was the publication of the academic papers delayed because of printing technology? Were ideas and positions by different individuals disseminated slowly because of the delay of sharing? Totally, Kevin. I mean, there's still a delay today, of course. You submit something for publication, I hear, and it's 6 months to a year after that things get in print. That's true here as well. So the first 2 Bretts papers famously were published in 1923. I think. Here's an example. One of the papers we're going to feature on Sunday is the August 1922 fieldwork by Bretts that is published in September of 23. So it's a year after the fieldwork is being done. There's other reasons there was that delay, I think, but anyway, that answers your question. One more, and then we'll do a little Google Earth to round things out. Sky, what was ambiguous about Pantops? I don't know, Sky. Let's go down to live and let's get your real-time reaction. Let me find that photo again. I thought it was thrilling that Brian found that photo. Where's here? That's what we're going to do. We're going to look at a photo one more time of Pantops, and then we're going to find Pantops by Google Earth by Glenn. Sky, you feel like playing live here? This quarry no longer exists. Glenn, if he's with us, can chime in on why. This looks like, oh, man. I was on a GSA field trip where I first met Jerome Lessman, and Vic Baker was the leader. This is in May of 2016. And one of our first stops was out by the Spokane airport, Airway Heights. And we went to I should find a photo. Okay. You want crazy time? You're going to look through a bunch of personal photos. I'm going to find this photo. I'm going to can I do this? 2016. Oh, God. I want to find it. Here, shit, man, here it is. So here's a photo. Can I make this bigger? This is in a quarry today, 2016, by Medical Lake, Washington. And we were brought there. In this photo there's David Gaylord, Washington State University. Here's Bruce Bjornstad. This is Mike McCollum, the geologist who brought us to this spot. And I was like, I don't understand what this is. What is this? And this is way before I knew about the Spokane ice sheet and was thinking about all this. Like everybody else, I just assumed everything was stage 2. But if I go back to, there's Pantops. And the reason that I was thinking of this place out by Medical Lake is that I'm not the expert. I'm hoping we have a few geologists who can chime in with a comment down below or email me. What do you see in this photo? I had the zoomed in one. Big boulders, angular with kind of some rounded corners, but a bunch of matrix here that looks kind of like dark sand. Isn't that what this looks like? And McCollum had this strange interpretation, strange to everybody, I seem to remember. I don't even know what it was. We might have to... Am I going to embarrass myself if I look for more photos? All right, I should be happy I found the one photo. That was a miracle I could find that. So there's Pantops. Kenneth says classical glacial till. Sky Cooley reminds me that Mike McCollum in that photo I just put away up by Medical Lake are what McCollum calls the Excelsior gravels, nearly identical to those in your field trip photo, also exposed near the golf course Lake Todd Creek. Oh, really? Okay, well, yeah, it's time to wrap this one up. It's time to wrap this one up. I think I'm going to say goodbye to everybody and do a toast to you. And then if you want to stick around for an extra 10 minutes, I will struggle with Glenn's Google Earth and we'll try to find Pantops before we say goodbye for real. A toast to you. Here's to Nat Nickel, Nat the Wonder Boy, CWU employee, who apparently has completely solved my audio and video problems to this point this winter. Thank you, Nat Nickel, even though you're not watching. More burgers and beer in your future, Nat Nickel. Thanks to you for watching this, live or in replay. Thanks to, of course, Jody and the rest of the volunteers, and we will continue to reap the rewards of the more than 50 hours of time that Jody and the Eugene team spent with the Thomas Large paper. This is just the tip of the iceberg. Here's to Jody and the team. Thank you. Here's to the staff at the Knight Library Special Collections on the campus of University of Oregon in Eugene for being enthusiastic about helping us. Thanks to Kirk from Philomath, who makes mugs that are too heavy for me to hold up. Thanks to everybody for joining us, and I hope that you will enjoy the next episode, and maybe you'll be able to watch us live on Sunday morning, January 14th at the normal time, Sunday at 9 a.m. for episode P. I'm not sure what it'll be called, but it's going to be Brett's in 1922. And there'll be more Thomas Large in that show. Thank you. We'll save Stevens. We will save Stevens enriched Brett's notes until Sunday. Okay, thank you. I love you and goodbye from Ellensburg, Washington, USA. Thank you. Goodbye. Okay, I never even paid attention to how many we had at the max. We got 187. No, we have 873 right now. Were we higher than that at some point? We're going to spend another 10 minutes playing around with Google Earth. I like doing it this way because the pressure's off. I don't have to, whatever. Okay, Glenn, you still with us? Get rid of all this crap. Thank you, Jeff from Vindman's Bakery. You've got to love it. Our top was 958 today. Pretty good for an off day. Thank you. We still have more than 850. So hopefully your Brett's files on Google Earth are up to date. If they are not, please go to nickzentner.com now and click under Brett's to get to the most recent versions of these. Brett's Glenn keeps updating these Brett's stuff, these Brett's files. He's got all sorts of extra stuff thrown in. I promised we were going to try to find pan tops. So if I click on, this is a sneak ahead to Sunday. There's Spokane. The Excelsior Gravels were over here at Airway Heights. And if I then put in all the handiwork by Glenn, Glenn says search for pan tops. That kind of takes the fun out of it, Glenn, but yeah, maybe I will. Can I just do this? Yeah. Oh, I have to unclick everything? Wait, if I do this, and then I just do this, and then that. This is page 1 of the 1922 notes. Pantop Station, according to Glenn, on the Inland Empire Railroad. And if I zoom in a little bit more, here's what it looks like today. There's a delay in the comments. Okay, Glenn says there are 3 Pantops locations, 2 gravel pits. Is this one of them, Glenn? Is this where Brett's and where that black and white photo of Thomas's was taken, do you think? Should I do this? Okay, well, let's zoom out and try to give you a sense if I get north back to the top. So if you know Spokane at all, here's downtown Spokane. John Stockton's house is right up here, south of I-90. And let's zoom in on John Stockton's house. JK. And there used to be a rail line through this neighborhood. I'm just trying to get in, zoom enough so you can see some street addresses. Can I not do that? Well, the famous Pantops thing is here, and I guess our gravel pits are right in here, and we're up high. I guess that's the point. We're up on this plateau. Glenn says, yeah, that's the first one. Okay, So, oh, I see. There's another one. I'm sorry, Glenn. So if I click off on that, and then here's the gravel pit. Oh, I see. In the neighborhood. So Large lived nearby, and they're getting around, I guess, by car in 22, maybe by train 22. But Glenn's got us. I'll do. If people really want to, if people know the Spokane area, what's this building here? Let's do street view here. It's across the street from the somebody's house. Okay. All right. So they filled in that gravel pit, I guess. It's probably down here. Check the boxes next to the other Pantops. There's another Pantops. There's 3 of them. These poor guys are having a stroke watching this. Yeah, okay, well that's... Oh, it's still there. Is this the big one? That's a big pit. They just have it, the walls are sloughed off. And they got a bunch of folks in there screwing around with dirt bikes and stuff, maybe? Okay, that's pretty sweet. Yeah, I see. Okay. Before we quit, Glenn, then, so do you have a guess, Glenn, or anybody else? The black and white photo came from, well, who does it matter? It's one of these 3. Thank you. Knut says, article in the Spokane Register, crowds flock to the old gravel pit. Okay. Oh, that's just an example of what waits for you. And again, I'll save the enriched field notes for next time. I guess that's enough for today. Thank you so much for joining us today. I sincerely hope that you enjoyed the episode. And if you're waiting for more on Pardee and Thomas Large and Brett's, I promise those characters will continue to be interwoven over the next few shows. It'll be a solo show on Sunday, where it's Brett's centric in 1922 and probably into 1923, and thinking about water for the first time. But based on emails I receive between now and then, and other things that I read for the first time, probably tomorrow, what else is there to do? It's too cold to be outside. It'll be below 0 tomorrow morning. I'll be ready on Sunday morning for the next episode in this live stream series. Thank you, everybody. I love you, and goodbye from Ellensburg, Washington, USA. Goodbye.